The news as it occurs.
Please stand by. We're experiencing technical difficulties.
This is the Richie Allen Show, live on richieallen.co.uk, Fab Radio 2, triggerwarning.tv, and TuneIn Radio. My name is Richie Allen. Katherine Horton joins me live in about 5 minutes' time. Don't miss it. Jimi Hendrix stand all along the watchtower on the Richie Allen Show. Some very interesting tweets coming in there. Very interesting tweets coming in. Goes far deeper. The European Union came out of the globalist petrochemical and financial elites' failure to take over Europe through their support of the Nazis in the Second World War. That's what happened. They knew what the Nazis were. They financed the Nazis. They knew what the Nazis were doing in the extermination camps of Germany and Eastern Europe. But they wanted Hitler to eventually to succeed. We've talked about this. Is historically factual. And in the post-World War II Europe, where Europe was under the Nazi jackboot, they would then own the finances, but not only the finances, the real wealth of the continent. That was the plan. They failed, and out of their failure came the idea for the European Union. And I've just given you the cliff notes of that, 3 paragraphs there, but I've gone into this in great depth with some terrific researchers over the last few years. That is what happened. Right. Excuse me, it's 5 past the hour. Let's welcome our next guest back to the programme. Now, excuse me, she's a truly remarkable woman. And when I met her back in early December 2016, I was amazed speaking to her off air by how reasonable she was, by how lucid she was, how obviously highly intelligent she was, an incredibly articulate, educated woman. And yet she was telling me a story that was quite amazing. She came on to talk to us. First of all, she's an Oxford-educated particle physicist and has a doctorate in particle physics as well. Mentioned this before. She's worked at the particle collider in Germany, the electron synchrotron in Hamburg. She's also worked at the Large Hadron Collider at CERN in Geneva and Switzerland. Like I said, very bright, very articulate, and very well educated. And when she came on to this programme back in December 2016, it was to talk about what happened to her after she attended a court case in London. Attending the court case was actually part of systems analysis research. She was looking into the English legal system. She wasn't in court herself. What happened after that was a campaign of stalking that she believed and later found out was carried out by the intelligence agencies of this country. And it not only happened here, but it followed her right across Europe as well. The accounts are available on her own website, which is stop007.org. I will tweet out links to that. There are links to my earlier interviews with her. She's spoken to many independent radio programmes since then. Let's find out how she is. Let's welcome back to the programme Dr. Katherine Horton. Katherine, welcome back. How are you?
Hello, Richie. I'm fine. First of all, I would like to check if you can hear me okay.
Oh, loud and clear. It sounds like you're in the room. You've got a great microphone there.
Okay, thank you. Because typically what happens when I come on a very important interview is that my microphone gets sabotaged or something else happens. So I'm very glad that we clearly have the full support of the intelligence agencies today.
You get the interference, do you? So when somebody rings you up, and I know that you get a lot of requests to speak, you do find that the equipment goes down, malfunctions until the interview is cancelled, and then you find out afterwards it all comes back online.
Absolutely. And actually these phenomena, they are not just random. I discovered through working with many whistleblowers that this is all part of technology that has already been deployed. So it's a completely integrated system that can take you down within moments. And so the telephone system is included in that, the internet and many other technologies that I knew absolutely nothing about, a couple of years ago.
You're very humble. I've enjoyed speaking with you in the past, and I've enjoyed listening to you speaking when you've talked to other programs. And I always emphasise your credentials, not because I'm in awe of your academic credentials. I'm not, but I respect them. But the reason I mention them is because, you know, people do listen to stuff like this. I shouldn't say stuff like this. They listen to accounts from people like you, and people are left incredulous. They're left with their mouths hanging open. They just can't believe it. And you're very humble. You accept that when people hear your account and the accounts of many other whistleblowers, they immediately jump to the conclusion, well, Katherine, genius and all as she is, she's had some sort of episode, you know. And you're humble when it comes to that. You don't get very antagonistic with people. You accept that some people just can't get their heads around that these programs actually exist and that you're not having some sort of, you know, psychosis or some sort of episode. How do you, I mean, you're pretty good at dealing with that, aren't you? Explain what it is that's going on, Katherine, from a technical point of view. What is happening to you and others? What sort of technology is being used against you? Talk to us about that.
So, first of all, I would like to say, let's start with how to deal with this incredulity, because the technology ties in immediately into that. Well, first of all, when you talk to people about this reality, for it is a reality, you have to undo decades of programming that we never knew.
This has been well trailed. This has been
So what you have to do is you have to kind of teach them a new worldview and make them sensitive to the existence of technology that seems high tech and modern to us, but is actually decades old. So what you have to do if you want to bring home to people what's going on right now in the world, and it's happening not just to me, but it's actually happening to every single person in Britain and in the Western world without their knowing, is you have to fast track them through decades of research and technological advances that actually happened back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And you have to change their perception of history. So, for example, what happened to me, because you started with a quick summary of how you know, I ended up in this, is the first thing I noticed is that I started to be gang stalked, and gang stalked in a very systematic manner. And the people who were doing the stalking, they were professionally trained. They used the same hand signs. They had a certain pattern of organizing themselves in the street and moving around me in a cloud. So I knew that this is something very professional and has to come from the intelligence agencies. Well, after a few years of the stalking, where I was still under the illusion that if I just ignore it, everything will be fine, in 2016, in January, I started being assaulted 24/7 with directed energy weapons that I didn't even know existed. And with being assaulted, I mean being assaulted in my own private home. I started being pulsed and shocked and literally gunned with electromagnetic pulses in a manner that was very much akin to somebody coming up and prodding you, or somebody coming and hitting you over the head with a hammer. And it was so unusual. I knew it was nothing to do with me. And then I started working systematically as a scientist. I tried to buy measuring devices to measure if it was something electromagnetic or something, maybe an acoustic shock wave or something like that. And bit by bit, I discovered that what I was dealing with was most of the time electromagnetic, or what I would call electromagnetic. It was passing through walls, which is not too surprising because we know, for example, that heat is passing through walls. That's infrared electromagnetic radiation. We also know that, for example, Wi-Fi is passing through walls. That's why we have, you know, internet reception within our flat, even if the router is 2 walls away from us or behind 2 walls. And then, so what I also discovered was that it was not just electromagnetic and was coming through walls. It was also highly focused or collimated and very targeted, and that it was being used as some type of harassment, some type of assault weaponry against me. And it took me years and years of figuring all this out. So everything that I summarized quickly was not just something that occurred to me, you know, tonight or last week. This is the work of years of hard work, of trying to reverse engineer the technology that I'm being assaulted with. And then after I had digested that I'm being at the mercy of the intelligence agencies and that they are stalking me and unlawfully surveying me 24/7, and after I got used to the fact that they were actively trying to disrupt my life and destroy me, and when I had digested that I was actually being assaulted 24/7 with modern weaponry, there was a final shock for me in May 2017. And that was a couple of, well, it was a few months after my very first interview with you that I discovered that I was implanted with microchip technology.
Yeah,
And that I'd been implanted in a very systematic and targeted way. And I also discovered that I wasn't alone. I wasn't just a freak human experiment. I was one of literally thousands and thousands of people. And by now, I seriously believe that a significant fraction of the human population is already implanted with this microchip technology.
Thousands. When you say thousands, it might even be conservative, a figure, because the amount of people who got in touch with this program in the time after you'd come on from all over the place, telling the same stories. And again, you always try and keep an open mind as a journalist, and while having respect for your interviewee, you always try and keep an open mind and not be dogmatic. And if I saw some information that contradicted anything that I had been told by a guest, I would be open to it. But I couldn't find anything to contradict anything, and all I was getting was people telling the exact same story. And worryingly, like yourself, Katherine, they were often articulate, well-read people, educated people, and in many other cases they had rubbed up against the establishment in some way or another, like yourself being through an Ivy League university, rubbing up against the intelligence agencies. And I began to see that there's a pattern emerging here, and these people are not deluded, they're not having some sort of psychotic episode. Something real is happening to them. And I have to say that, I do believe it. And I must mention as well, before Katherine comes back in here, that she very cleverly, when this began happening to her, she launched her YouTube channel. And while this was going on, while these pulses were happening and were hitting her, she was recording the impact it was having on her and showing the data that she was getting. And that was brilliant, Katherine. That went a long way, I think, to convincing some people who might have been on the fence that this was very real. And all those videos are still there on your YouTube channel. I'm pretty sure they're all still there now.
Absolutely. And, this is something that I could do because I am a high energy physicist. I have been trained to a very high level, but I have to also say, and this is extremely important for all the other thousands of victims out there, I also, as a physicist, can confirm that it is incredibly hard to prove this. And there are several reasons for that, as I found out. Number one, it is because if you leave the house and leave your measuring devices just a single time unsupervised, the intelligence agencies will come in and they will override the hardware. And recently, a man called Richard Lighthouse, a former NASA engineer, confirmed that the measuring device that he has, which is identical to the make and model that I have, has been overwritten in exactly the frequency range where these pulses are being fired.
Wow, so he's a NASA engineer and it's happened to him as well.
Yes, exactly. And there's a very recent interview with him on my YouTube channel on the special investigators. And I'm trying to bring together those people who are not just reporting these crimes, they are actively investigating and launching court cases against it. And he's one of these people who has an active court case, and he has tracked the criminal network behind this all the way to Air Force Base Schriever, which he says has the control and certainly the surveillance of all the satellites in the world. So what is going on, I should say, is being launched through very many ways. So the shots that victims experience, they are being fired from neighbors, they can be fired from cars, even from rucksacks, but also from satellites. And for a long time, I was very reluctant to admit that it could be satellites, because my gut instinct is always to just stick to the simplest explanation and don't go for the aliens and satellites and nonsense.
Well, that's the academic in you see. You're an academic and you know that, you've got to get to reach people and to get people to consider it. You've got to there's certain levels that you've got to meet people on, and I can understand why you were a bit reluctant about the satellites. I've had a theory. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I mean, we've been connected on Twitter. It's been a while. It's been quite a while since we spoke, but I do think of you often, and I have had people on the programme in the last 12 months talking about this, and your name, I always bring your name up because I do think of you often, and I'm glad that you're back on the programme today. There's two ways I look at this, and I've read your website. I was on your website again today. I look at this two ways. One is that people of all different backgrounds are being experimented on. So you got some very intelligent people, and you have people who maybe are not educated, and then you have people maybe of lower intelligence maybe. And maybe that there's a mass experimentation period going on where data is being taken down, is being basically acquired on how this affects different people. Now, that's one train of thought, but I don't believe that. I think, in your case, it could not be a coincidence that you worked at the Particle Collider in Hamburg and at CERN in Geneva. And I think when we spoke last, back in, I think it was mid-2017 when we last spoke, I think I might have brought this up. Something you've seen or witnessed, something, not something that you were hiding, not in a million years, but you were party to something, I think, Katherine. I could be talking through my backside here, but I can't imagine it's a coincidence that such important, very high profile, but also very secretive projects, that you were there. I think somebody is worried that you might know something. Am I just being silly here? Is that just kind of science fiction film type stuff? Or maybe am I onto something maybe?
I think the answers are kind of yes and no at the same time, and I'll explain why. And this is because when we first spoke, my understanding of my own situation was very sketchy because I lacked the full understanding of these body implants. So this is going back to the first interview in December 2016. And as I said, I found out that I am implanted personally through my my former colleague Melanie Richan in Brussels, because she is an expert on these implants. And she immediately recognized, the laser surgery scars on my forehead. Wow. That are so fine that they look like skin folds. But she has seen many victims and she has an eye for this. And she showed me using the bug detector that we had inside a Faraday net, which we used to measure body implants. She showed me that I too am implanted. And through that, I began to understand neurotechnology and how that is being deployed. And through understanding the phenomena and the symptoms of neurotechnology, I managed to go back through my own history and really try to investigate backwards in time when I was put into this program. And I discovered that, and this is now my best current knowledge to date, I discovered that I wasn't put into this program in 2011 when I first started being stalked by MI5. I was actually put into this program the first week I went up at Oxford as an undergraduate, and I was 18 years old at the time. Wow. And the reason why I came to this conclusion is because there were certain effects or certain curious incidents that started happening at Oxford that are now, looking back, a telltale sign of neurotechnology having been implanted in me as an undergraduate during my first year. And this means, for example, things like waking up literally on the second of the full hour. When I say the night before, we should really get up then and then to make the train, without an alarm clock, without anything, but literally down to a second. Well, this is typical, neurotechnology testing and gaming that the intelligence agencies engage in. And
you couldn't do that before, Katherine. You couldn't tell yourself what time to wake up, and then you'd wake up, no?
Literally, and not down to the very second. And you also don't wake up, just within an instant where you're fully on the ball as if you'd just been pulsed to the head. Right. You have to be pulsed to the head to be able to do that. And stuff like that happened. And then I also remembered that I was actually stalked very intensely in the very first few weeks at Oxford. So my current best understanding is it could be that I was in this program before as a child, and there's certain things that might indicate that as well. But for sure, MI5 loaded me into this program as a human guinea pig when I was 18 years old.
And you think they play a long game? I think that's the term that came up. before they play a long game. And
And another thing, that now that we're on this long game topic, now that I'm also helping court cases and I'm trying to work as a court expert and assist other victims, one of the things that became clear in the two cases that I'm working on right now, which is Frédéric Laroche in France, and by the way, his court case is on the 29th of November in Grenoble. And then the second one is Siegfried Thomas in Biel in Switzerland. In both cases, investigating the history and the background, the victims and I discovered that actually there's a very high likelihood that they were loaded in as generational victims. In other words, their parents were already in this program. And one of the key, my suspicion is that this goes back to the old Nazi lists of people. The lists that they used to keep about the people in the Holocaust, but also about their own employees. And I think what we're looking at is multi-generational experimentation and also multi-generational takedown operations.
Well, this is brilliant, Katherine. Can I come in there? This is very interesting because I've thought of this a lot since we spoke, a lot. And another possibility is we go back to when this, because as you quite rightly said, the technology is decades old. And because it's decades old, and because, I speak to I've had a lot of astrophysicists on this program over the years. I've had NASA people on the program who talk about time and, what we're learning about time all the time, how it isn't linear and all this sort of stuff. And I wonder, when this technology was, when it became available, why wouldn't the establishment or the elite or whatever you want to call them, why wouldn't they identify certain people as potentially subversive in the future? And they would know this when they are born, or when they're very young girls or very young boys. Why wouldn't they identify them as potentially being a threat to, the establishment or a threat to the order of things somewhere down the line? And so why don't we tag these people now? I've often thought of that as a possibility as well. Or am I way off with that?
No, I think you're right on the money. And this is exactly why the establishment, or I'd rather call it the crime cartel, okay? Yeah. Because even among rich people and what we would consider the establishment, they split into those who are members of this criminal network and others who are not. So I just call them the crime cartel. And the members of this crime cartel are obsessed with genetics and bloodlines. Yeah. And it cuts both ways. They are obsessed about their own genetics, but they are also obsessed about the genetics of their enemies. And the enemies are not some soldiers or warriors. They are the everyday people who have the cognitive abilities to look, to spot the lies, look through all this complexity, and have the personal qualities to fight back and fight to death. And in that sense, that's why I said you were, when you asked, did I see something at CERN? I don't think it was something I saw at CERN. Yeah. I think it was something I saw when I was a toddler back in communist Romania. So maybe your audience doesn't know, but I was born in Transylvania as to a Hungarian and German family. And there are many Hungarians and Germans in the territory that now belongs to Romania. And I was born to a family where my grandparents were so-called dissidents. In other words, they were not willing to become snitches and informants for the communist system, and they were not willing to sell out and to bring about other people's downfall. So my family is mostly doctors. They were mostly working and trying to keep society together and help everybody. And that must have annoyed a lot of people who were still, in the aftermath of the biggest Holocaust.
Of course.
You had a big killing fest going on all across Europe. And what I saw as a toddler equipped me perfectly to what I have to do today. And I think at the time I didn't know, but I was already being watched by the people who had watched my parents and grandparents. And that is literally the best, my best understanding. And then add to that the business element. For example, there's, I think, a book out now about the involvement of IBM in the Holocaust. And I hope I get these details right, but I think it was IBM that provided the very, very early day punch card.
They did the cataloging system. They supplied the cataloging system for the death camps. They did. That's right. Exactly. Absolutely.
And and now what it means is that IBM, this company that exists today and has now access to pretty much everything that we're doing, through the technology that they provide for us, they were involved in mapping people and in cataloging them. Now, do you think they would have destroyed their archives? I mean, they were so valuable. Those were actually the original versions of what the NSA is doing now, which is mapping everything about us. How often we make spelling mistakes in our emails, everything is being mapped by computers. And it goes back to the catalogs of the Holocaust. So it's, I really genuinely think that the situation we're in now, and maybe this helps people to understand what's going on, this is nothing new. It is the continuation of the big Holocaust.
But they can't keep it quiet now, because we've never been as bad as social media is in so many ways. It's also, in that other way, it's enabled us to connect to far more people than we ever could. So we're seeing people come forward from around the world. On the implantation in your forehead, have you or will you try to get that removed? What are you going to do about that?
Yes, I would love to, because I was tortured all day today. I'm being pulsed right now. I have many, many implants all across my scalp. And what the intelligence agencies are doing is that they're ramping up the chip currents. So you have ever more pain, and moving around and just existing is ever more impossible and crippling. Now, the problem is that I have many victims who have tried to remove these implants. Now, the typical program set up by the crime cartel is that if you approach a doctor and you say you would like to have this implant removed, you're first of all painted as delusional.
You're mad, yeah.
And then after that, they will try to do everything to put you away and ideally kill you, even if they can. Then if you get past that by reaching a doctor who has integrity and doesn't know anything about it, he might operate on you once, but when he discovers or she discovers that it's military technology, they will refuse to operate on you again. So in other words, to get this technology out of your system, I think the average victim would have to have something like 36 operations.
Wow.
Now imagine how long that takes if you have to, put up with this faff every single time.
It's very dangerous as well, yeah.
And then the other thing is that there are cases where one type of implant that's maybe very big and shows up on scans is taken out. Other implants are put in, including nanotechnology that's self-assembling. So what do you do? And so my current strategy is to focus entirely on the publicity, on outreach work and the court cases, and basically convince the courts to give us a court order that this should be done.
Now, tell us about the court cases. Are these two cases, because you mentioned two cases, one in Germany, I think, one in France, I think you said. Are they cases being taken against the intelligence agencies, or one intelligence agency? Who's being litigated against? Who's the...
It's much better than that, Richie. The two cases, the one in actually Switzerland, in Biel in Switzerland and Grenoble in France, they are, as far as I can make out, are being taken by the intelligence agencies against victims to destroy them. One of them is the Frederic Laroche case in Grenoble, is, as far as I can make out, based on the evidence, is a staged car accident, and they want to put the victim away, claiming that he's so ludicrously dangerous on the road that, he has to be locked up and medicated for life. Wow. The second case in Switzerland is one of a pensioner and his wife who are being machine gunned with directed energy weapons from their neighbor, and their neighbor is suing them for insult to honor for claiming that they are being assaulted by this neighbor. So okay, so now the question is what the hell to do, right? So I am trying to get victims to actively sue the intelligence agencies like I have done in 2016. But there's also a way to use these court cases and to what I call system judo these court cases against the intelligence agencies by just putting as much expert testimonies and evidence into these cases against the criminal networks inside the intelligence agencies that they literally just, cease and desist by themselves. They back off. But it's extremely hard.
Well, you found yourself how difficult it is to take an intelligence agency to court, it's extremely difficult because, you know, it's obviously a big faceless organisation. You're looking at trying to find out within, trying to get any information. I mean, the media doesn't even attempt to do it, but even if the media did, it's like trying to get blood from a stone, trying to find out who works for these agencies, what their departments are, and who might be involved in the sort of programme that's being directed against you and others. It's so hard, Katherine, isn't it?
Yes, in a sense, yes. But when you start fighting against the system, or the discriminality rather, because I'm not really fighting the system, I'm just fighting criminals, people reveal themselves because they have to. You know, if somebody is a member of this criminal network, he can stay undercover just for so long, but when push comes to shove, he has to either act in your interest or the criminal network's interest. And if you just keep throwing cases at them, bit by bit, you can uncover every single one of them. To give you an example, when I went into court, I stood up pro se, so representing myself. I stood before 3 judges, and the first 2, they were shocked. And I could see, you know, people who get confronted with these crimes go through a cycle. And the first step of the cycle is the WTF face, you know, when they think, what the hell is this?
Yeah, that's the gang stalking, right? Yeah. That's when people are being gang stalked, which must be a terrifying thing, that.
Exactly. And then the second one is the one of just incredulity. But then when they get past that, because they take on the evidence, is one of utter shock. So just by observing the judges, I can tell, are they insiders or are they not? Because those who are honest, they will realize that there's no out. We have to solve this criminality now. Those who are, you know, derive benefits of one form or another from the crime cartel, they will fight you as hard as they can because they will want to keep their status within these covert criminal networks. So what I'm always saying to victims is that just start moving forward and note down the people who help you and those who actively fight you. And sometimes people fight you because, you know, either they're confused or they have other interests. But then with time, we'll find out who everybody is, you know. And the really encouraging thing is I worked extremely hard to use my insight into physics and complex systems to find a method to fight back. And the best answer I came up with is an affidavit that I compiled, an affidavit template that's on my website, and actually that I will release after the show. And it is codifying every single type of offense that the typical victims of this criminal network suffer. And most of them suffer an entire plethora of things that are so vast and so egregious that it's just not part of the statistical distribution of normal crime. So some sort of targeting program has to be behind that. And one of the things inside the affidavit template is also a public and a private list of perpetrators. And this is the list of people who the individuals have identified as having acted maliciously against them. And my strategy is to just make that public. So there will be a list of perpetrators that will just go out for everybody to see, and then a private list of perpetrators that we will deal with through the courts as well. You know, and
it's a very sound. I think it's a very sound approach. Again, it's a very academic approach. I just want to ask a few questions that are coming in from listeners. Inevitably, I've had 1 or 2 tweets from people who think that you're making it up. I've tweeted back to somebody there saying, I can understand, even though I don't agree with it, but I can understand how somebody might think, because we're conditioned to think that people like yourself are, you know, deluded. I can understand why someone might think, listening to Katherine either now or 2 years ago, oh, well, she's imagining it. I can imagine that. I can understand why somebody might think that, even though I don't agree with it. But I can't understand why anybody would conclude that you're a fraud, that you're making it up. It's interesting. I've been doing programs like this for many years now, and I obviously have a commercial and national media background. I'm a real journalist with qualifications and degrees and what have you. It doesn't mean anything, but what strikes me is that your sincerity is unquestioned, is unquestionable. What does make me laugh, though, and I see this all the time, is when somebody like yourself, because you're articulate, because you're educated, when you put yourself out there and you get some attention, and you have done, others who have an interest in this very subject immediately claim that you're some sort of informant or paid shill or this sort of nonsense. And I think it's probably down to jealousy, the fact that you've gotten a lot of attention, not just from this programme, but from others as well. You tend to take this all in your stride, though, Katherine, don't you? You don't get too worried or bogged down by people saying you're a fraud or you're making it up. You just kind of carry on doing what it is you do.
That's right. And partially it's because I've read the documents that Edward Snowden released about the targeted takedown program. So, for example, GCHQ, when they actively send trolls your way. And these are paid people to say the worst things about you.
Yeah.
And I'm working on how to actually uncover these and drag them into court as well. But, you know, what it comes down to is there's a healthy amount of skepticism, which I absolutely encourage. I encourage that everybody should question me to the last, all the statements that I'm making, and should check up on my credentials. So this is why I uploaded all the documents that I'm allowed to upload, you know, evidence that I did work at Oxford and at CERN and so on and so on. I'm not allowed to upload my Oxford degree certificate because then it will be copied and sold online, you know, for fake Oxford degrees. But people are very welcome to call up my old college and check every single thing that I'm saying. But this type of skepticism is extremely beneficial. But because we all actually need to learn discernment, you know. But when somebody says, oh, I'm an informant or I'm agent, I can prove that I'm not, because I plan to take every single Western intelligence agency to court or fight them in court. Now, no intelligence agency in their right mind would actively pay somebody to be in the vanguard of their own takedown. You know, so that's number one.
It doesn't make any sense to me. Why would they want somebody to make this an issue? Why would they want anybody to make it public anyway? They don't want people knowing about this stuff. So the idea that they get an Oxford graduate, a PhD, to ruin her life by making up a pack of lies is just preposterous, because there's no win for the intelligence agencies there. Because you, with your ability to be articulate and to be easily understood, who needs that? You know, if I'm running one of these programs for MI6 or for the German intelligence agencies, I'm not going to give you money to talk about this. It's just ridiculous. Anyway, that's just me. Loads of comments on this, and we've got probably 15 minutes left. There's loads of really interesting comments. One being, is there a transhumanist angle to this at all, or is that something that you haven't had the time to look into? You know,
oh, the answer is yes. Exactly. It is a resounding yes. And I'm so grateful that people put that term, you know, raised that term, because once you have a name for it, it's kind of more tangible. And transhumanism, as far as I can make out, is number one, the biorobotization of people. So the fusing of humans with machines, which will lead to a takeover, and has already led to a takeover of humans by machines. And transhumanism also implies that we are expected to transcend our humanity, our humanism. And that is also what these criminals, who, by the way, are utterly psychopathic and mentally degenerate, that's precisely what they're dreaming about. So they do have these fantasies that they will just become some sort of uber powerful cyborg, but they don't realize that what they're actually becoming is a bunch of, you know, sad saps. But yes, that is exactly right. And you know, it's so important, because once you use this term transhumanism and the biorobotization, and once you learn more about these chip implants, you also discover that a lot of innocuous looking technologies, like our Wi-Fi networks, like, for example, 5G and smart meters, they are part of the transhumanist agenda.
Yeah, this is so important. This is hugely important. Isn't it amazing? Again, isn't it amazing to be talking to you this week when UK companies admitted that they're in talks with Swedish companies to purchase implants to put between people's thumbs and forefingers. And the UK mass media has been reporting this as a very positive thing. No balance to the stories, Katherine. You know, again, whether I'm a good or a bad journalist is down to the listener. But I'm competent. If I'm going to do a story about microchipping for employees, I'm going to find some opposition to it to balance my television news segment story. But no balance whatsoever in the UK media. This is a great thing. let's get Swedish companies microchipping all of our employees so that we can open doors, we can access the secret files in our companies, more security, and everybody's just going for it. Yeah, it's a great idea. Why not? And this ties into what you've been talking about, no doubt.
Absolutely. And if people knew that the reason why it's so positive is, for example, in the UK, by the way, I talk about the UK because most of your listeners are in the UK, but the same applies to German Intel, to Swiss, Indian or Chinese or Russian Intel. They are all part of the same corporation, really, as I believe. But the reason why the media is reporting it that way is because they are part of the cartel. I think in the UK, most of the media outfits could be called MI7. MI7 was the old propaganda unit. If you knew that most of the BBC actually works for MI7 and most of, say, The Guardian or whichever daily newspaper, The Telegraph, would you take that fully in? I mean, if you knew that this is a message put out by MI5 to cover up the fact that they have already implanted most of you, and they want to make it kind of, they're trying to cover their asses, let's put it like that. Because if you discovered that your 5-year-old daughter has already been implanted and is being set up to be raped by remote control and will be part of a business plan where people can purchase a subscription to rape her remotely whenever they want to, you would look completely differently onto these chip implants, And what I just mentioned, this egregious sounding example of, a young girl being chipped and remotely raped, that is actually the everyday experience of most of the victims I know. We are all chipped in our genitals and we are all being raped. Wow. And I want to say that publicly because this is one of the hardest topics to talk about.
And these chips have shown up in MRI scans, haven't they? They have shown up. So
actually, exactly, these chips have shown up. And we were just talking, with the investigators that I'm working with, how the hell to enable people to collect evidence. And currently I'm investigating if actually ultrasound might be a good option. And some victims reported that they have seen odd structures in ultrasounds. So the principle behind that is if there's a dense object somewhere in soft tissue, this should cause reflections in ultrasound and light up. And especially as far as genital chips are concerned, ultrasound might be the quickest way to see that. I should also say that most chips, to doctors looking at scans, will look like calcifications or lipoma. And that's what they call them most of the time. Because
hang on, Katherine, calcifications, or what was the second thing you said?
Lipoma. So these are the two most common, calcification and lipoma, the two most common diagnoses I've come across. And the reason why this is what they call it is because that's the only thing they can think about, and that's exactly or think of rather, and that's exactly what it looks like.
Tell me about the genital implant. Is that messing with fertility? Is it?
It's in principle, yes, it should do, because these chips are communicating with radio frequencies nonstop. It's like having a little radio emitter in your genitals, depending on where the chip is, yes. And then add to that the fact that these chips are being accessed by targeted radio frequency towers. So, for example, when the intelligence agencies really want to psychologically, break me down, I am going somewhere which is really important. I'm entirely focused on what I'm doing. And then I will see one of the gang stalkers take out his mobile phone, point it at me, and then I will feel how I'm being raped by remote control.
And you can't do anything. At that stage, you can't do anything. You can't grab... Yeah. I mean, for anybody who's seen Katherine in her videos, Katherine is... you come across as a diminutive. You're a very slightly built lady. It's fair to say that, isn't it? I mean, the reason I'm asking that is because you can't very well jump on the guy and try and arrest him or do something like that.
That's right. And usually it's not just one person. Usually there's half a dozen of them around you. It's like cockroaches. If you see one, there are at least 100 around you, and no, you can't. And you're completely helpless. And add to that the fact that there's a type of pulse or waveform that seems to travel not just through building material like Wi-Fi, but even through sheets of metal. And that's a technology that also seems to be involved in the communication with these chip implants.
Is that related to 5G at all?
It could be. It could be. I suspect it is, exactly because 5G is not just a better version of 3G and 4G. It's a fundamentally different technology. So 3 and 4G, as I understand it, were kind of irradiating off spherically from the emitter, but 5G are collimated pulses. And that's exactly what you would use if you wanted to pulse chips, or if you want to build up a massive weapon system, that can knock people out.
Tell me this. I asked you this 2 years ago, and I don't want to be rude or to pry or to be too personal, but obviously listeners who might be hearing you for the first time, at least on this program, they might be hearing you for the first time, and some people might have not heard of you before. And by the way, Catherine's website is stop007.org. Check it out, stop007.org. What we have here, folks, in case you've just joined the programme, is an Oxford-educated particle physicist and systems analyst. She's a Master's of Physics. She got her doctorate from the University of Oxford, worked at the particle colliders in Hamburg and at CERN in Geneva in Switzerland. Incredibly intelligent, incredibly articulate, and she's talked very candidly in the last couple of years about how and why she believes she's been the victim of gang stalking and targeting through directed energy weapons. We've talked about that in this hour. If you've missed any of it, the podcast will be online very, very soon. I was going to ask you about your family and support from your husband and your extended family. Have they been, was it difficult for them early on? And I know we did talk about this 2 years ago. How supportive have they been for you going through all of this?
Well, I have to say, in the beginning, it was extremely hard because my parents just rejected any talk of this, which is strange because they fled the communist system, so they know about this crime cartel. But then I discovered that actually certainly my mother is chipped, just like me. And I also learned that this technology can cause anger. It can make you drop your attention or make you focus on other things and make you reject things. And that is exactly what I have seen. So when I managed to work around this technology, I managed to get my parents to be very supportive. So by now they have accepted this. They can't help me, but they have completely accepted it. And, they are doing whatever they can to help me. So
Great.
that certainly has happened. Now, as far as my husband is concerned, I'm sorry to say, and I'm also will be quite frank about this because I know this happens to virtually every single victim. My marriage has been broken up. And my marriage has been broken up in an extremely targeted way. And this is extremely important for people to know about because if they start fighting this crime cartel, the same thing will happen to them as well, most likely. So if they expect it, they can guard against it. And what happened is that I have noticed that my husband was being worked at night. So I woke up many times and I just heard him groan in pain, literally. And he was very uncomfortable, but was still asleep. And when I tried to wake him up, I would put my hands somewhere, first on his cheek and then on his forehead or his head. Eventually, I realized that there was an extremely intense microwave beam or something related to microwaves coming through the wall, pointed at his head. And what that showed me is that he was being tortured, but he was also being worked through neurotechnology every single night. So imagine, it's like in the film Matrix when he goes through the training program. It is a bit like that. In your sleep, the intelligence agencies can work you and do torture training and conditioning on you to make you assume certain opinions or to turn on certain people. They can show you images, they can send voices to you that you will perceive subliminally. And this, I have evidence, I personally witnessed this happening. And now they succeeded. They have broken up my relationship, and my husband and me are getting a divorce.
I'm sorry to hear that. I am I'm genuinely sorry to hear that, though not entirely surprised because, how difficult is it for you, what you've been going through for years, and then if you're right and this has been happening to him, it's no surprise at all. I'm disappointed to hear that. And you said that you will come across this will be fairly common for people who've been targeted like this.
Absolutely. And Richie, the biggest benefit, if I may call that, from just coming forward and talking about these problems, should be that many, many whistleblowers who are planning to come forward or have come forward, who are struggling maybe in their personal relationships, that they realize that it might not be anything to do with them, or even to do with the person who's maybe turning on them. They literally cannot help it because this technology is so overpowering. So my only way to fight back is to collect information from a large group of people, put it up online, and hit the courts, and now start getting court orders and emergency injunctions against these people, because the truth is we know exactly who they are.
This is really interesting to me, and that's something I'd like to follow with you on your journey, to be honest, and pick it up again in future programs, not to leave it as long as it has been since you last came on. I'd be delighted to get back into this with you in the early new year, because I think you're credible, Katherine. I'm supposed to be objective. I'm well aware of that, but I find you very credible. We spoke at length before December 2016. We had a long phone conversation, and I find you credible, and I find the possibility that these programs are real and going on. I find it very credible as well. I really do. I'm sorry that it's what I'm sorry to hear what you've just told us about your relationship with your husband. I really am sorry to hear that. But I do want to point out to our listeners, she's been, and again, it's the academic training, there's no doubt about it. She's been a meticulous recorder of everything, for want of a better way of putting it. She's meticulously recorded everything that's been happening on the YouTube channel and on the website. Stop007.org is the website. And if you go to YouTube and you look for Stop 007, you'll find Katherine immediately, and you'll see Katherine, which is a very good thing. First of all, you'll see her in the videos, and you'll be able to hear directly from her what's been going on. And she's kind of put all this evidence together, which I think is very compelling. We've got about 90 seconds left. I'll give you that 90 seconds for you to sum up today. Thank you for coming back on. Really like speaking to you. It's a very difficult thing to be talking about. I do believe it's going on. It's happening to a lot of people. And I look forward to speaking to you again in the early new year. But I'll let you sum up, Katherine. Final message for our listeners today.
Well, my final message for all the victims out there, or for people who want to understand the full scale of this, please join me tonight when I come online on my channel. I'm not sure when that will be, maybe in an hour, maybe in 2 hours, where I will launch the affidavit collection. And there I will explain my strategy for fighting back. So I think when you really take on everything that I've been saying, or what it implies, most people get very scared. And I guess my message is, do not be scared, do not be terrified or paralyzed by this. Join us in fighting back. And if you're not affected, well, actually, I think you might be without noticing, but if you're not affected, you can really help us by keeping a tab, and also by putting pressure on the government agencies and law enforcement who can help us. External people asking about our cases and asking, why the hell are you not helping, makes a huge difference. So, my goal is that by Christmas, we should be way underway in having this shut down once and for all. And my final sentence would be, we have to all work together, because what we're doing is we're shutting down, to my best current knowledge, we are shutting down to an entire global crime cartel that has been with us. Some people say since the last ice age, but certainly for thousands of years. So please, we need your help.
Great stuff, Katherine. Not at all. Thanks for coming on. Stay in touch through Twitter. Send me a message when there's anything to report, and we'll be happy to report it and get you back on. Stop007.org is the website. Stop007 on Twitter as well, if you want to follow Katherine on Twitter. And that's the handle on YouTube, Stop007. Thanks again for your time, Katherine. Speak real soon. Look after yourself.
Thank you, and bye.
Bye for now. Katherine Horton, live on the line to us there from her home in Switzerland. It's 3 minutes to the top of the hour. Thanks for the tweets there to come in during that. We'll wrap it up right now because I'm out of time. Thanks to Michael Rivero, who came on despite the fact that he's a bit under the weather. Thanks to Mike for that, top man, trooper in the first hour. And to the lovely Katherine Horton, whom you heard there in the second hour. We'll be back again tomorrow, Wednesday, at the usual time of 5 p.m. That's GMT or UK time, however you like to say it. In the meantime, look after yourselves and one another, leaving you with some music from Sting. Don't forget the podcast online in 10 minutes time. YouTube will be up a bit later on as well. See you tomorrow.